Hey guys, my name is Luke. Today I'm going to be showing you my new preset called SplineCam, which will help to simplify the process of creating more complex camera moves that are difficult to do using the standard 3D camera in Cinema 4D. I've always found that camera frustrating to use when I'm trying to create a very complex camera path, having to go into the timeline and whatnot. It's just kind of a pain in the butt. So I created this Espresso preset to help simplify the process using splines. So to start off, I'm just going to hide this text element for a moment, and we'll be getting back to this in a second. And I'm going to go into my content browser and bring in the preset. And if I hit the back thing there, that will help to reset the model. And as you can see right off the bat when I bring it in, we have a shaded model of a camera with a little tripod and a little bit of a dolly and what looks to be the beginnings of a track underneath it. This model is here to help you to visualize your camera path as you're trying to create your scene. As a filmmaker myself, I've always found it to be annoying in 3D programs when I try to lay down like a dolly track. There's nothing really visual there to help me see where that track is, and so I wanted something in the preset. If we go over here, if I click on make sure I'm selected my preset, you can see we have 4 new tabs here. The first one is the camera track tab, which shows all the options that I have for creating the actual track itself. The next tab is for camera movement, which is for establishing how this camera is going to be moving along that track. The third tab is the camera target tab, which will help you to establish where the camera is pointing throughout its journey. And the fourth tab is the visibility tab, which will allow you to change the visibility options for the model. So for instance, once we have a track established, I could click this right here, and as you can see down here, the track has disappeared. The camera element, I can make that invisible, and same thing with the tripod. I provided an option for its visibility in the render if you actually wanted to use this as a model in your animations. So I'm going to bring back up the text element, and let's start actually creating a camera path. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my top view, and I'm going to go into the spline settings and choose a Bezier spline. I'm just going to draw a very simple camera path. Nothing complex, but this is just going to be something to kind of establish how the preset works. And after I do this, then we can move on to more complex scenes. So I'm just going to create one thing right there, another one here, and a final one right here. And I'm just going to go Control A, highlight them all, and make sure I have a soft interpolation between all of them, just so that it's a very smooth path. And I'm going to go back into my normal view. Go back. There's our spline right there, and there is our text. So now I'm going to go highlight my SplineCam preset, and here's a spline I've created. I'm going to reset or rename this to track. And I'm going to hit the preset. I'm going to go into our camera track so we can establish the track right off the bat. And I'm going to drag and drop this track spline right onto this area where it says spline. And right away we can see that we actually have a track, which looks pretty cool. And if I hit a reset button, the camera will snap onto that, and I can hit play. And you can see it's really slow and weird right now, but you can actually see that the camera is moving along the track. But obviously we don't want it to be this really jerky motion right here. We want it to be a nice fluid motion. So the first thing we need to do to adjust that is if we head into our spline that we just created, we can see our intermediate points are at adaptive, and we want this to be at uniform. And so I'm going to change this, crank it up way high to 1,000. And now if we hit play, you can see that our camera move is a lot smoother, and it's not nearly as jumpy. If I hit play again, you'll notice that the camera is moving at a constant speed. It isn't increasing or decreasing speed as it goes along the track. This is the standard way that the preset comes, but we can change that if we want to make it faster or slower or something along those lines. So if I go under camera movement, you can see that the enabled motorized dolly checkmark is checked. And this is just to provide a constant speed for camera movement so that when you're first creating your initial camera path, you can test it out very quickly and easily. So if I can crank up the speed, and you can see that the camera is moving a lot faster, go all the way up to 10 really fast, or slower, as the case may be. So I'm going to bring it back to around 4, which is the default. The other option is a manual position dolly. So if I'm going to uncheck this motorized dolly, and I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to enable manual position, and if I scrub this bar right here, you can see that now it's a manual setting. And this is very helpful if you really need to be precise about where your camera movement is. So I normally will start with a motorized dolly while I'm establishing my path, and then once I have something done that I really like, I will move on to the manual position to create better timing for my camera movement. But for right now, I'm going to go back to motorized dolly as we test out some of these other settings. I'm going to head back into the camera track tab, and just to show you a couple more settings that you may want to know before we move on. First, we have this camera height offset. And if we scroll down here and we look down here, you can see that even though the spline is right where this track is, the camera is a good distance above that. And I've just done that so that it works well with the model. But you may come into a situation where you want the camera to be exactly where the spline is. So if you want to change that, all you need to do is change this camera height offset and bring it down to 0. So I'm going to do that. And now you can see that the spline is right underneath that track. It's that black line that I don't know if you can see that well, but the camera is right on that. And obviously if you do this, the model looks kind of strange. So you could head into visibility and just make all that invisible. And so now you just have the camera on the track. But in this case, I'm going to keep that the way it was before. I'm going to make that all visible, go back to my camera track, and bring that back up to 100. And I'm sorry about the noise in the background. The people in my building are a little noisy. If you look over here, we can see that we also have settings for a rail. We don't really need to worry about this at this present moment, but later on, this will be very key in establishing camera moves that have a bang to them. But we're not going to worry about that for right now. And the third option down here is for SplineCam, which is something else that I'll be getting into later. But for right now, let's not worry about that. Now I'm going to head into the camera target tab. These settings are here to help you establish where you want the camera to be pointing during its camera move. So I'm going to open up the SplineCam preset, and I'm going to view through the camera. And as you can see, we're a ways away right now, but the SplineCam text is not actually in the center of our viewport, and we actually want that to be there. That is to say, we want it to be in the center. So let's look here at the options. The first one is the target object, and this allows us to drop a specific object from the scene that the camera will be focused on throughout its entire camera move. It's also animatable, so if you want to switch from object to object that the camera is focused on, you could do that. So I'm going to drop in my text element. Oops, I gotta highlight that and drag that in there. Also, you can see that I need to activate it, and I need to unactivate this option. And if I back up and I hit play, you can see that now the text element is directly in the center of my viewport. Now this looks okay at the moment, but it's not ideal. I'd like to have the camera be a bit closer to our logo as it goes throughout its camera move. So if I go into our 4-view settings, you can see that I've just moved the bottom 2 down. You can see our scene right here with our track. And this is kind of the view settings that you'll want when you want to fine-tune the way your track is. So over here I can see my camera view, and up here I can see my spline and my camera. So I know that I want this track to be a bit closer to my target or my logo. So I am going to go into my track settings or my track spline, and I'm going to highlight this right here, my 1 point over here. I'm going to move this closer, and I go ahead over here and do the same with this one. And I'm going to click on the middle one as well, and as you can see as I move this closer and farther away, that the viewport updates, and you can get a good idea of how close you actually want the camera to be throughout this camera movement. You can also see the little tripod and track appear and disappear. I can't figure out a way to get rid of that, get that bug out of there, but I think that's just a result of the way the MoGraph module works. So I'm sorry about that, but for right now we're just going to have to live with it. And now I'm going to move this a bit closer too, and move this one closer as well. And now I'm going to go Control A to highlight all 3 points on my spline, right click to soft interpolation. That helps to smooth it out a bit. And now if I hit play, you can also see here that for whatever reason it doesn't really update that well when we're in this multiple camera view position. So I'm going to go back to my solo view, and I'm going to hit play, and we can see that that looks a lot better than what we had before. But obviously this is a very simple example. The reason I made this preset was to help with more complex camera moves. So let's try to go to something that's a little bit more difficult. So I'm going to hide this scene right now, and I'm actually going to delete my preset and my track, and I'm just going to start from scratch. So now I'm going to open my second scene, which is a small model. It looks like a very horribly made tower, but pretend this is maybe like an elaborate tower that you wanted to show off to the internet, or maybe put on a reel to show your modeling skills. But you don't want to put like a still image. You want to have some sort of camera move around this model to make it look more interesting. And this is a great use for SplineCam. So I'm going to drag in the preset, and one option that comes standard within SplineCam is the circle cam. So I'm going to hit the enable circle cam button right here, and as you can see we have a track already built. If I reset this, the camera will go right back onto its dolly. And if I hit play, you can see the camera moves around the circle. But right now the camera is not even looking at our tower. So what we need to do is head into our camera target settings, and I'm going to open my scene and drag in my tower to my target object and enable that and disable this spline target settings. As you can see, if I hit play, now it's focused on our tower. And if I open the preset, view through our camera, you can see that we're looking at the very top of it. This really isn't that interesting of a viewpoint. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at another option for our target settings, which is the spline target, which I had just disabled a moment ago. So let's go back to our normal view, and I'm going to hide this tower. Actually, no, I'm going to keep it visible. And I'm going to go into our side view right here, and I'm going to create a new spline. I'm going to go to my Bezier spline, and I'm going to do a vertical spline. I'm going to do one below the track, and have the second point be above the tower, just like that. And I'm going to call this target spline. If I go back to my normal view, and I hide the tower again, you can see that there is the spline right in the middle. So if I head into my SplineCam settings, go to my camera target, I will disable the target object and enable the spline target settings. And now if I drag and drop my target spline into the drop box right here, you'll see that now the camera it's still pointing at the top like before, but if I drag this position on spline right here, you can see that there is a built-in target that has been placed on the spline right in the middle. And as I drag this up and down, the camera moves to be pointing at where that target is, even though we can't see it right now. If I highlight this, draw spline target, right here you can see it's like this little spike ball that's right in the middle, and I'm actually going to just hide the tower once again. And if I move this up and down, you can see that's where our target is. And if we go and we view inside the camera, and I scroll this up and down, you can see the camera follows that target. And it's on the spline that I just created a moment ago, or whatever spline that you've created and you've dragged into this slot right here. So if I enable the tower once again, and I'm going to uncheck the spline target view, just like that. And this is a nice setting so that if I hit play and this is circling around the object, I can maybe animate this. So if I start here at frame 3, do a keyframe, and now let's go to like frame 112 and move this all the way up and do another keyframe and rewind and hit play. You can see that it goes in the circle and we get to see the whole model, which is nice. But this is still pretty limited because the track is very low. It isn't high up. It would be great that as this camera rotated around that it could rise up with the object so that maybe we could see the top of this tower. I'm going to head back into the camera track settings and let's see if we can remedy the situation. I'm going to get out of my camera view so we can see what we're looking at. And we have several options that will allow us to create a more pleasing camera movement. We have this height setting, which allows you to adjust the height of the track, as well as a repetitions that maybe we want to have it go around 4 times, or 3.3 times, I should say, around the object. Maybe we want it to be a bit higher. Maybe we want the radius to be a bit bigger, so it's a bit more of a wider circle or more of a narrower circle, just depending on what you want. Let's move our repetitions back here to like 2. Zoom out a bit. We also have a rotation setting that will allow you to, maybe you want the camera at this very specific height, but you want it to be you want it to be on the other side of the object when it's at that height. So you could adjust the rotation so it stays at the same height, but this way when it's at that height, it's on the other side of the object. We also have a bank setting so that if you want the track to be maybe curved in or maybe you want it to be curved out, this will come in handy later on when we get to our third scene. So the height setting would just adjust from the distance from this point down here to that point up there, whereas the height offset, it's moving the whole track up or the whole track down. We also have this positioning setting, which allows you to move the track around in your scene, depending on where you need it. I'm going to bring it back to 0, and I'm going to bring this, let's say, back to -100. And if we go back into our camera view and we hit play, you can see that we have a more interesting camera move. But let's try to maybe fine-tune that a bit more. So I'm going to start back on frame 0, and I'm going to go to my camera movement tab, and I'm going to take off motorized dolly, and I'm actually going to enable manual position. And I'm going to start at 0, and actually let's start at 2%. And I'm going to make a keyframe, and I'm also going to 2%. And then I'm going to move to frame 150, and let's see how high we want this to be. Let's try 60. And I'm going to make another keyframe. Now if we go back to frame 0, and let's go into our camera target settings, and this looks to be a good view. Maybe we'll start right there so we can sort of see the rest of the tower, or at least the start of it. Before I do that, I should probably delete the animation track that I had previously and make a new keyframe right here, and then go to frame 150. And let's see where I want to be focused on. Let's say right there at 64.74 and make another keyframe. So if I rewind, and you'll see quite frequently that when you rewind, the camera doesn't move right off the bat. So you hit rewind twice or something along those lines. Then you hit play, and you can see the camera move goes up the spiral. But maybe, I mean, this whole track in the back, it's nice visual, but in this case it can be rather distracting. So I'm going to turn off the visibility right here. And you can see it start right there. So I'm pretty satisfied with that. I'm going to hide this scene right here, and I'm going to delete my SplineCam preset, and let's start from scratch. So I'm going to make the third scene visible. And as you can see, I've made 3 words, SplineCam rocks, and I've made a spline that goes through them already for our camera path. This is a common situation if you want to have the camera move sort of like a roller coaster around your MoGraph elements. This is a feature that I really wanted to build into the preset. So I'm going to bring the preset in, and I'm going to open it up and go into the camera track settings, and I open up my scene, and I already have my track made. And I'm going to drag the track right here that I made earlier, and I'm going to drag that right into the spline slot, and we have our track. Already you can kind of tell that the track is intersecting with the words, and that could be rather distracting as we try to work through this. So I'm going to go into my visibility, and I'll keep the camera visible, but I'm going to take off the track and the tripod. Since we're going to be going and doing very precise track work with the camera flying right through the A, I'm also going to want the camera to be right on the spline. So I'm going to adjust my camera height offset and bring that to 0 as before. So right now, if I hit play, you'll see that the camera is moving through here, but the viewport is changing quite radically, and it's rather distracting. What we want to do is we want it to work like a roller coaster, like I had mentioned before. If we head into the camera target settings, we have an option down here called camera aligned to track, or tangential. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce that, but that is the technical word to describe it, I found. And if I uncheck that, activate spline target and hit this section right here, this checkbox, and hit play, you can see that the camera moves along like a roller coaster. So I'm going to hit the view through camera, and go back to the beginning, hit play, and you can see it already sort of work, but it's very fast. So let's go into the camera movement tab and bring our speed down to say 1.52. Hit play, and you can see the camera move rather smoothly through this. But one thing I would like to change is I would like to have this, as we go around this corner right here, and the next corner right here, is I'd like the camera to bank, sort of like a roller coaster or like a plane would as they kind of go around a corner. And we can do this using the rail settings. If we head back into the camera track tab, you can see that the rail is already enabled. For those who don't know, a rail is sort of like a helper spline. It works with your first spline, and it helps the program know which way is up. And the best way to demonstrate this is to show it. So I'm going to get out of my camera view, and I am going to take my track, and I'm actually going to duplicate it. So I'm going to hold Control and drag and drop to make a new track. And I'm actually going to call this rail. And I'm also going to head into the preset and go under visibility, and I'm actually going to enable track visibility because this will really help to demonstrate the way the rail works. So now I'm going to head back into camera track, and what I want to do is I want to drag this rail on top of the default rail right here. And it looks really weird and really janky. So what we need to do is go under our rail, and let's go to our coordinates, and raise our rail up so it's higher than our track. And now you can see that it smoothed the track out. So what this rail is doing is, it's, like I said before, it's acting as a helper spline. For instance, at this point right here, works directly with a point right beneath it, and it tells the computer, okay, for this portion of track, or for this portion of the spline up, or the direction of up, it points directly through this point in the spline. So if I were to move this portion of the spline to the right, you can see that the track banks with it, to the left or to the right. I'm going to undo that. And so with this in mind, we can head over to, say, this point right here, which is right on the corner of our spline, or right in the corner of our track. And if we move this a little bit inwards, you can see this a little bit. Let's move this a little bit to the right. We can see that the camera, or at least the track, banks right around that corner. And if I hit rewind and I hit play, we can see the camera curve right around that corner. So that's pretty cool. We can see that it also got really high. So let's lower that a little bit to make the corner a little bit harder. We can head over here and we can hit this point right here. And let's move this inwards a little bit to make that bank a bit more as well. And so if we head into our camera view and let's make the track invisible again. So obviously this camera path is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. It really needs some fine tuning. But this can get a little bit difficult when we're working with the rail due to a couple limitations that the SplineCam preset has. Unfortunately, these presets are there because of some idiosyncrasies with the way Espresso works and also with the way the MoGraph module works. I spent quite a few hours trying to figure out a way around these problems, but I just couldn't figure anything out. It's just the way the program is made. And once Maxon does something to fix these problems, I'll be the first one in line to adjust these and make the preset work a bit smoother. But I want to show you sort of what these problems are so that when you run into them, you know how to fix them. Or at least know how to avoid them, because you can't actually fix them, which is a big problem. So I'm going to head back out of this view, and let's say I go into my rail settings, and I hit this, and I start moving this around, moving this down. Let's get our track visible so we can really see what's going on. And then maybe I realize, oh, I need to move my track a bit as well. So I'm going to highlight this point right here, and it's going to move this way. Maybe I want to move it this way. And it just basically gets to a point where the rail just doesn't match the way you want the track to go at that moment. And it'd be really good if you could just reset the rail and get like a brand new rail to work with. But if I hit the rail and if I hit delete, I hit play, and it still seems to work fine. And if I went and I brought in a new rail, it would probably still work fine initially. But because of some underworkings within the preset, because of, like I said, Espresso and MoGraph, eventually you may run into problems where the whole preset just stops working and you would need to delete the preset and start from scratch, which we don't want to do. So to avoid those situations from happening, basically you never want to have a spot in the preset where a spline would go, such as the track spline or your rail spline, or even if under your camera target spline. You never want to have these options be blank. And so right now this one is, but that's something that we want to avoid at all costs because eventually it will mess up with the preset. So I'm actually going to delete this. I'm going to bring in a fresh one, and let's bring in that track again right here. And I'm going to duplicate the track, make a new rail, raise up that rail like we had before, and bring that into the preset. So the way to avoid having a blank spot right there is basically you always want to drag and drop a different spline on top of that before deleting it. So let's say I did need to delete this track rail. What I could do is I could head into my SplineCam settings, and as you can see here, we have a default track spline, default spline rail, default target spline, and just drag one of those into that spot before deleting it. So I'm going to drag the default spline rail right here, and now I'm free to delete this and know that I will not have any weird errors later on in my project. I could then duplicate the track, make this into a rail, and just drag and drop it in like I had done before. No problems, except for the fact that I need to raise the rail up, which I always forget to do. So just by dragging and dropping one of these default splines on top of whatever's in here and then deleting your old one, that will always work and that will never result in an error. The other thing you don't want to do is just ever delete anything within the preset itself. Obviously, you could delete the whole preset, but if you had some very specific settings that you wanted to maintain, you wouldn't want to delete these three, and you wouldn't want to delete this, which just holds all the other the innards, so to speak, of the preset. So there you have it. That's SplineCam. I've worked pretty hard in eliminating a lot of the bugs, but I'm sure there are quite a few hidden still within it. Once you found them, please let me know, and I'll do my best to fix them. I'm really excited to see what you guys come up with using this preset. Once you've made a project that uses it, please send me an email with a link to your project. I'd love to see what you guys have done. It's been a lot of fun to work on, and I can't wait to see what results from it. So thanks for watching, and I hope you buy it.